Oh, so hello everyone and welcome to today's IAPC&M CPD Building Masterclass. My name is Julie Kennedy, all the way from the Netherlands, and I am your host. Today, we welcome the wonderful Ian Jefferis, an IAPC&M accredited practitioner coach and training provider with a wealth of knowledge in a very particular area that I am very keen on knowing more about to share. So first, some housekeeping. Our call today will be a maximum of 1 hour, including 15 minutes Q&A. The session is recorded, so for those joining us, please mute yourself, but keep your video on so the speaker can see they're not talking to themselves. Use the chat box for questions and suggestions, but we will be taking questions at the end. Now, as I said before, our theme today is something which I believe is extremely important for all of us and is entitled Children Need Us, Adulthood Beckons. Personally, I believe we all need to play a part in helping the next generation. So let's focus, make copious notes, and over to you, Ian.
Julie, thank you so much indeed. That's very, very kind of you. And whether I'm an expert or not, I don't know. Some people talk about an expert as some X being out of or from, and spurt a drip under pressure.
Oh.
So
I'd never heard that.
Anyway, oh, well, there you go. We learn something every day. Yes, children are incredibly important to all of us because, after all, as we progress towards our dotage, and I'm further ahead than many people, somebody else has got to take the reins. Now, if they can't take the reins, who is going to look after us and who is going to look after the world?
True.
It is becoming more and more obvious that there are various aspects of life training that are missing. Whether that is because us adults don't have the time to teach them, whether the world is just spinning faster and faster and the children don't want to listen, I don't know, but it's almost a time of stop the world, I want to get off sometimes. You know, communication is so fast. It's all but instantaneous, and there's so much information out there, it is very easy to get totally drowned in it, whether it's factual or whether it's fake news. But first of all, who am I? Well, I don't expect you to know, so I'll rephrase that one as who I am.
Mm-hmm.
My name's Ian Jefferis, as Julie has said. Now, the important thing is that I have a background. We all have backgrounds, but mine was 25 years in the Royal Navy. It was 20 years as a small business owner, owning 2 stores on the high street. I've been with Noble Manhattan Coaching for 8 years. I have been working as the lead developer for the adolescent and child coaching program that we run for the last 7 years. I'm an accredited practitioner coach with the IAPC&M, hurrah. And my company is Young Minds Coaching, which is a community interest company, which effectively makes me a non-profit. And I've been doing that for 8 months. Now, if you add all that up together and add my education, I am 85. So therefore, some of it was concurrent, I fully agree. However, the fact remains. I have a bachelor's, I have a master's, I'm a member of the Institute of Leadership. And life, as I'm concerned, I'm in my 3rd career, and perhaps the one that I enjoy most. Why do I enjoy it most? Well, that's a very good question. But actually, I love helping people. And particularly, I love helping adolescents. Not quite so clever with children, but adolescents are effectively those who I really feel need all the help they can get. But having said children, realistically, we need to help them as well. And we need to start that help at an early stage, and I'll come on to that later. Now, we have a few problems. Problem 1, increase in mental health challenges. This is not just the United Kingdom either, this is global. Now, why do we have this increase? Good question. Before 2019, it existed, but it became more and more talked about. So there became a greater awareness. Discussions became open. COVID-19 exacerbated the situation because there was reduced social interaction, reduced routine. and people didn't know how to cope. Let's face it, COVID-19 put us in a unique situation. In the United Kingdom, we closed down social interaction. We've never done that before, never in our lives. And we closed down the schools. And it wasn't until they reopened that we realized realistically and practically quite how badly it affected the students. Not so much from what they had not learned academically, but what they had not been able to learn socially because of that lack of social interaction. So the summary of problem 1 is mental health issues predominate. Now, problem 2, the young brain. If you've been studying young children, I can't say I have my own, but as far as I'm concerned, I haven't deeply studied them. But basically, the adolescent brain is mush. Why nature decided that that was a good time to reset the entire brain, just as the children are being introduced to various hormones and things like that, haven't got a clue, but reset it does. And the result of that is that a lot of the teenage brain, they cannot focus further than a day ahead. Okay, they cannot focus further than an hour ahead, perhaps, but they don't make decisions with a long-term view. That comes later. But it gives us also a great opportunity, because that brain is resetting, to help them to reconfigure for the better future. So the brain goes from a total jumble of wires to a nice ordered computer. Well, that's the theory anyway. So problem 3, sorry about this. Yes, there are more problems, but there is a solution, so don't worry. Problem 3, employers report new workforce is not ready for work. Employers report new workforce is not ready for work. There's a lack of resilience, a lack of tolerance, a lack of commitment, a lack of communication, inability to communicate perhaps, lack of concentration and attention span. There's a what's in it for me mentality. Where's the teamwork? It's almost too easy not to work sometimes. The grass is so green on the other side of that fence. And we know about it all the time through social media, through the internet, through being able to look at what's going on and where. And there's a lack of career planning. Perhaps that's also the teenage brain, the lack of being able to look further ahead. But then the information is not provided either. And this is one of the big problems. So problem 3, perhaps, is lack of core life skills. Now, coaching in education and in the education environment, it works. But the trouble is how to get it there in the first place. Many people don't fully understand what coaching is, and that's not surprising because coaching means many things to many different people. Sports coaching, for example, is far more about technique, and very often the word coaching is used about physical technique. We talk about life coaching. Some people see life coaching as others telling them how to run their lives. Well, those who know about coaching know that's not true, because coaches don't tell anybody what to do. Coaches get them to work it out for themselves. However, when it comes to the young, sometimes you do need to go to mentoring. You need to help them with ideas. But the way I work is I always will say to the to my young clients, I can give you some examples. You can provide your own, but whatever you do, it's your decision as to what you do. They have to own the problem. I'm just going to sort of skip ahead on my slides a bit here in a moment. Okay, now all of us have differing values. All of us have differing perspectives. And importantly, all of us have differing ways of learning. Each and every one of us is unique. And paradoxically, that's the one thing we all have in common. We are all unique. So when it comes to the world of education, they have lack of time to promote the curriculum required. Sometimes there's lack of finance as well. And this means that things get dropped. And the few things that get dropped are perhaps the things that matter most. It's outside of academe. Has academe been overtaken by the word education? Is education just a synonym of academe now? Or perhaps it's more. Perhaps education is a three-legged stool, currently balanced precariously on one leg, just about to fall over. That leg, academe. But what about the other two legs? Well, in my mind, those other two legs, which are but stumps when they should be the same length as academe, are preparation for life and preparation for work. And if you have all three of those legs the same length, you have a nice, stable education system which will support our young as they progress to adulthood and as they progress to the workplace and as they progress to running the world. And that's important. They're going to be the ones who are running the world. We are going to be the ones who are sitting back hoping they make a good job of it. So it's up to us to ensure that they have the tools and the abilities to make a good job of it. Now, somebody said it's been attributed probably to many people. Some are born leaders, some aspire to leadership, and others have leadership thrust upon them. Well, that's the case, isn't it? But the more people we can thrust leadership upon, we can thrust life skills upon, we can thrust being able to work in the workplace upon, the better. Some will just go to it like a duck to water. Others need to be encouraged just a little bit. They've got it there, lacking self-esteem perhaps, but they've got it. Others need to be coerced. But the best way of coercing them is to start young and to start them on those core life skills. But those core life skills, they're not just going to help them in their big future. They're going to help them in their small future, in their everyday, in their small future, tomorrow, next week, next month, this afternoon. As they develop, they learn to communicate, they develop that resilience and tolerance. They learn to understand that what they hear, what they read, may not be what was meant. How many of us, even as adults, pick up a phone, see a short notice on social media, and we just go off in order to think the world is about to end before you've even thought about what did that sentence actually mean? And do you know what that sentence actually meant? Do you know when it was written, how the person was thinking when they wrote it? How many ways could you reinterpret what has been written? And arguably, it will almost always be more than one. So it may not be the end of the world as you know it when you receive a message of doom and gloom, of apparent doom and gloom. Perhaps there's more to it. Perhaps it's a misprint. Perhaps it wasn't meant to have been sent in that way. And that's just the word. Now, if we hear the spoken word, then that's bringing another element to it, isn't it? We listen for the subtleties, we listen for the nuance, we listen for the tone. But in a social media statement, there is none of that. There is no body language. the things that as coaches, we are trained to look for, we are trained to listen for, but they're not there. So the whole thing can be misconstrued, it can be misinterpreted. And communication is so, so important that we've got to get it right. We've got to be able to explain to people to look further than what is just said or stated. Even communication with ourselves is important. Do we know exactly how we feel? Or is there something in our body that's actually trying to tell us something that we don't know about? Have we got the facilities to understand what it is we're looking for? And that's as adults. And we have experience. And some of us have more experience than others. But take that down to the teenager with very little experience, undergoing bodily changes perhaps, and things like that, which they have not come across before. And we expect them to cope with that? Well, but we have, as I say, we have differing values, we have differing perspectives, we have differing ways of learning. And the education system is so hard pushed that they need to corral as many people as possible into the norm so that they can generate the results for the most people in the shortest time. What about the people on the margins? You know, life is a spectrum. I'm not talking about necessarily neurodiversity as a spectrum. I got told off about that before by somebody who was on it, saying there is no spectrum. Or are we all on the spectrum? Probably. But if we all learn in a different way, if we all think in a different way, how are we going to pick up what we're being taught? Well, perhaps that's what coaching's about. Because in my mind, and I don't think I'm the only one here, in my mind, coaching is about the client. It's about the coach going to where the client is, not the client coming into the coach's space. And so therefore, when it comes to neurodiversity, when it comes to ADHD, ASD, all those compartments, which again, there are people who will tell me only exist because they want to compartmentalize people. How are we going to cope with them? If we can do it with coaching, then we are eliciting the best out of them. But it may be we have to do that separately from the main structure. So coaching is desperately important. So going back to life skills. Now, we run a program coaching adolescents and coaching children because coaching them is different to coaching adults. Of course, it involves the same techniques. It involves questioning. It involves deep listening, 360 listening, call it what you will listening, level 3. It involves listening, but it involves also those questions. And if you ask teenagers questions, sometimes they say, I don't know. And rather than the adult saying, I don't know because I don't want to answer that question, they don't know because they haven't got the experience. So that's why coaching adolescents and coaching children is perhaps more specific than coaching adults. It's knowing how to develop a rapport with them, because while we as adults have gained the experience of developing rapport with one another, and also having the tolerance of accepting other people and falling into that rapport, the young don't have that. They don't take prisoners. If you cannot develop a rapport within 2 or 3 minutes, you're toast, you're lost, because they're not interested. So you've got to be able to develop that rapport with them. And so how do we do that? Well, it goes back to that big word, doesn't it? Communication. We've got to be able to communicate, not just with our peers, but with others as well. And that is so important. Development of that communication is so important. It's arguably the most important leadership skill as well. And after all, we want to train leaders, don't we? So it's these life skills which actually underlie an awful lot about what we as coaches do. It's development of these life skills. Why do people go and find a coach? Because normally there are two reasons. One is they're not coping with life, or the other one is they're coping with it perfectly well, but they want to cope with it better. And both of these actually, under the surface, involve developing the life skills. So what if we ran life skills as a curriculum within schools? Now, it's very interesting. I've just come from a meeting this morning of a group of highly experienced business people. They are mentors. Most of them, it's a voluntary organization. Most of them are retired, and they have a huge wealth of experience of business. And I begged 3 minutes of their time. It wasn't meant to, but it suddenly dawned on me, what a good idea. And I asked them a couple of questions. The first question I asked them was, problem one that I talked about, are children ready for work? And they said, no. And of the hands that I could see, I would say that it was 95% said no. The next generation are not ready for work. And that's frightening in itself. So I then carried on and said, look, I'll give you 4 choices. Whose responsibility is it to prepare them for work? Is it formal curriculum education? Is it education at the outside of education, extracurricular, combined cadet force, Duke of Edinburgh's if you're in the United Kingdom, or scouts, guides? Is it being part of a team for entrepreneur work and things like that? Is it the parents who should be taking the lead in this? Or should it be left to the businesses? Well, you won't be surprised to know that they all agreed that it should not be left to the businesses, that the job should actually be done before they got there, or at least started. There was a good show of hands that it should be the parents. But many of us are parents, and we know how difficult it is to train our young children in those life skills, to develop tolerance, to develop resilience, communicate. Many parents are hard pushed to find the time these days. They are so caught up, and this is not a social divide problem. This is across the entire social spectrum. What may be a social divide is the reasons why parents have no time. But I'm not going to go into that. But it's just as true that parents at the higher wage end of the market have children who are not coping as parents at the lower wage end of the market. So I then said, well, okay, but what about it being a school problem? And interesting, about a third agreed it should be a school problem. And a third agreed that it should be outside of the curriculum. So that was interesting. So I then asked the 5th question, and that was, or should it be all 4? In fact, I didn't. I said, it should be all 3, because by this stage I'd ruled out business. And I got 100% reply. So we are all in this together, whether we are parents, whether we are guardians, whether we run a local rugby club, whether we are involved in netball, basketball, or whatever, whether we're teachers, whether we're classroom assistants, whether we help charities, we are all involved in preparing our children. And so therefore, surely we must do it to the best of our ability. But sometimes we don't have the tools for that. Or we don't think we have the tools. We can do it to the best of our ability, but some of us need that support. Some of us need some tools of the trade, some tricks, if you like, and that's realistically where the other subject comes in. The other subject? Perhaps the subject that dare not speak its name. It's not maths, it's not English, it's not French, it's not German, it's not Spanish, it's not history, it's not geography. In the United Kingdom, it will come under PSHE. I can never remember what that stands for, but it's something like psychological, social, and health education. And I think they're just about to rename it. Just now I've got it wired up. I think they're going to rename it, so I'm going to have to think of, try and learn another one. Never mind. But it's that part of the curriculum, perhaps, that does and doesn't exist. It's part of the curriculum that is not assessed. It's part of a curriculum where perhaps children can not be receivers of huge amounts of information, but have the opportunity of discussing the situation, of discussing the problem, of thinking about how to do things better. It could be about self-esteem. It could be a lack of self-esteem. It could be negative self-talk. Isn't that another lovely classic? Negative self-talk. How many times have you heard of children say, I can't do that. I can't play football. I can't get thin. And how many times is that built and built and built? Because kids, bless them, love to take the mickey out of each other, don't they? Some of them just take it too far and it's called bullying. Others can rise to the occasion and give as good as they get. And it's called banter. And sometimes, perhaps banter does make the world go round, but the borderline between that and taking offense is so narrow. Perhaps that's another thing we've got to do. There's the resilience coming in of helping them to identify when fun and fear change places. Not just for the person who is being targeted, but the person who's doing the targeting. Perhaps they need to determine why they are picking on somebody. What good is it doing everybody? Perhaps it's the bigger picture that's sometimes missing. So the other subject is a series of core life skills programs. We use it within the coaching training, absolutely. But they're core life skills programs. There's one about preparation for sleep, about having a digital sunset, turning off the phones an hour before going to bed, preparing for bed in a nice, gentle, relaxing way so that when your head hits the pillow, invariably you go to sleep. You make best use of the time for good quality sleep by doing some preparation. Now, we all know that preparation prevents poor performance. But actually, perhaps preparation permits peak performance. It's another way of looking at it. And by preparing and getting into a routine, then things get done so much better. There's one on stress busting. Oh, sorry, stress busting, on exam busting even. Brilliant piece of work and absolutely ideal. Trying to take the myth out of the fear of exams and how exams can actually help rather than hinder. Again, it's preparation. Start early and actually the problem doesn't get so bad. Now I'm just going to an apocryphal tale. It's always good fun, isn't it? I have had a client who came to me with a problem. She was referred to me, which was very nice. And the problem was that she decided that she was a perfectionist. Oh, another P, how about that? She was a perfectionist. Okay, I said. So we looked at this and she said she has difficulty starting an essay because she doesn't believe she can complete it to the standard that she requires. Forget the teacher, what she requires. And Friday would have to be written Friday evening, handed in on Monday, usual routine. Friday evening came and went, can't start it. Saturday, here comes the stress. You know, if I don't finish this, it's not going to get handed in. I'm not going to get any work, any marks. Sunday comes along, stress takes over. Procrastination has just edged it. Stress takes over. Essay doesn't get written. Come Monday, if anything gets written, it's rubbish. Normally it doesn't get written. Stress is too much. Can't go to school. I thought, okay. I was lucky with this client actually, because I said, well, what happens then if you write the essay on Friday? Oh, but I can't. Why not? So I told her about the 80-20 rule. You can achieve 80% of the task in 20% of the effort. I said, would that not be better to have 80% done rather than 10%? She said, well, when you put it like that, yes. But what about my teachers? I said, have you asked them? No, I'll do that. Good. When are you going to do that? Nail down, you see. And so she said, I'll do that tomorrow. I said, good. So what are you going to tell me on Wednesday? I said, okay, I'll tell you I've done it. Good. Accountability. And so she did. The teacher said, give it a try. I knew the teacher would, because they'd far rather have a good stab rather than nothing at all, wouldn't they? But she was as good as her word. On Friday, she wrote that essay and she left it as it was after 2 hours, which was our agreement. On Saturday and Sunday, she didn't touch it and she had a wonderful weekend. And what really impressed her on Monday when she handed it in and then found out was she actually did better than if she'd done it to nearing her perfection. And wow, that was the start. After that, she flew. Well, she's just done her A-levels. She's just done her end of school exams. And I look forward to the results. But one thing she did say to me was, I managed an entire exam period without having to go home due to too much stress. That was almost more important to her than actually achieving what is hopefully some very good results. That's not about me, that's about her. I just asked the questions. She did the work. But that's the sort of thing that coaches can do for people in schools. It's not just about dragging them up from a, from a failure of self-esteem, from poor mental health, next stop the counsellor situation. It's also about tackling it early, getting in there before it gets to that situation. Now, the fire service in the United Kingdom and probably well around the world used to be called the Fire Brigade. Wonderful, wonderful organization for putting fires out. They were very, very good at their work and they did what they could. But when the fire was just too great, they had to contain it and let it burn itself out. More recently, I say more recently, in my lifetime, about 25, 30 years ago, they became the Fire and Rescue Service. But what they were really interested in was preventing the fires happening in the first place. So while they were brilliant at putting them out, they far rather they didn't start in the first place. Isn't that what we want for our children? Isn't that how we want to help them grow and develop without having the fire? Or if it's a fire, a very small fire. So here we go. Here is a system of life skills backed up by coaching, which not only intervenes in mental health issues, but also can prevent them starting in the first place or mitigating them if they are already underway. Now, if that isn't a full answer, then please let me know what is. That we can train children, or they can train themselves, and we can support them in that training as they learn to grow and develop, as they learn to interact with one another. but interact with a little bit more information than what they've got at the moment, that we can grow and develop them as they progress, such that they are ready for life, they are ready for the workplace, and they are ready to cope. I won't say with whatever the world throws at them, because that's a big ask, but they'll be more prepared to fend it off if they have those life skills. I'm just about coming to the end of what I have to say, but just to recap the other subject, basically there are 7 modules, and each one is visited once a year in a slightly different way. After all, you don't talk to a 5-year-old like you talk to a 15-year-old. They don't talk to you that way either. And if you started trying to develop rapport with a 10-year-old in the same way that you develop rapport with an 18-year-old, you'd get short shrift. But it's about focus and awareness. It's about getting them just to sort of step back out of themselves and to think slightly bigger picture. It's about developing that time, which is not wasted, but it is used gainfully, even if it's time that is theirs, time that they can do something on their own. How many times as adults do we go through life saying, I've just wasted an entire day, I've done nothing. And we've berated ourselves, we've beaten ourselves up about it. But actually, perhaps that's a good day. Perhaps that's a day which we needed to do nothing. So let's give it another name. Call it me time.
Yeah.
Call it Jennifer time, call it Jonathan time, call it whatever. Time for you. Give it a name, give it a title, make it formal, and actually do what you like. And if it's just looking out of the window and daydreaming, heck, that's good for you. It's your time. But if you actually give it a name, it means something. It means that I have not wasted this time because it has been my time. Relationship with yourself is so important, isn't it? Even as adults, again, we lose sight of our relationship with ourselves. Sometimes we're too busy. We forget about ourselves. We forget about breakfast. I don't. I never have. I've always been determined to have breakfast, but then I'm one of those people. My daughter, on the other hand, is not. Now, she's doing a driving test in 2 days' time, and I've told her quite categorically, she will be having breakfast because her driving test is at 9 o'clock. And if she tries to do her driving test without having breakfast, I'm not going to hear the end of it because I'm not convinced that she's going to give her best. Anyway, relationship with yourself. Relationship with others, so important, isn't it? Have that relationship. Learn how to react with others. Learn what to say, learn what not to say. Learn when to shut up and listen. Communication. Learn when to shut up and listen. Yeah. Communication comes back every time, doesn't it? Resilience. Learning to just knuckle down and get on with it. Because there are times when you can't just throw in the towel. There are times when you've really got to keep going. Future planning. I hadn't mentioned that one before. But isn't that important to all of us? How many people go into a career because either they've been told that that's what they're going to do, that's what the computer said to do, I haven't got a clue, so that's what I did. How many of them have actually thought about what they really want to do early enough that they can do something about it? Accomplishment. Now, this takes us out of the counselling world, doesn't it? How many counsellors deal with moving people from where they are to where they want to be because they want to be better? They're already good and they want to be better. How many counsellors do that? How many therapists do that? How many coaches do that? Lots, hopefully, because that's real fun, isn't it? somebody comes to you with I'm here, I want to be there, and I really want to go for it. And it's our job as coaches to help their mindset achieve that challenge. That can be real fun. So that, in a way, is a conclusion of what I've been talking about. I've angled it to the adults, but also it's about the children. It's about the next generation. But if we can associate in ourselves what their problems are, then we can help them. How many of our parents went through the same process that we did, but we are doing, and saying, how is the next generation going to cope? Well, they will, but let's give them that best start. Coaching can provide that. The other subject can support that coaching. And with that remark, what are the questions?
Wow, Ian, thank you. I mean, my mind is reeling. I mean, this was really, it touched on so many of the things that I'm personally also concerned about, whether it's my own children and the way they think about jobs and about all that you've said, you know, the resilience, the empathy, the long-term vision. It's all so true. And I mean, already we often feel, you know, if only somebody could have given us those skills back then. But the society nowadays is a different one and has changed quite dramatically than the one that, you know, I'm 56. So, you know, when I was growing up, it's a lot faster and the development is going faster and faster. It's very much social. As you said, you know, the misreading of text and communication, and you've got to have and you've got to be better, and the others are all around you holding you up for it. And I really feel for the young adults, adolescents nowadays, having to live and find themselves. And like you were saying, you know, there's the me, there's the, you know, we tend to spend a whole lifetime getting to the less of the doing, but more of the being, you know, and also you mentioned, you know, the me time and maybe just even sitting quietly. I mean, this generation does not even know what it is. Every second of the day is filled with receiving something or other on some medium or another. And it is worrying because they are the future, not just to look after us, but they are the future who will determine is what is needed on this planet. So, I mean, I'm hearing you see lots of things. I've got lots of questions about also, you know, is there a specific age where you think they would be more open to this? But if I understand you well, this system and these 7 modules and this curriculum, the idea is that this will be presented in schools and revisited every year, but at a different level.
Yes, that's correct. That is that's the pinnacle, perhaps. You know, yeah. That's the, if we can start from the word go, we can, you know, we can grow and develop. But even if it's just a single year, that wouldn't be a problem. You know, at least it's a start. But the earlier we start, I strongly believe that the earlier people will be, you know, the children will become more aware, they'll be more empowered. And realistically, we're looking at about 8 lessons a year, which is very, very little in the big scheme of things. Now, even if the lessons, you know, in secondary school are 1 hour long, 8 hours in a year.
But from the fact that you're revisiting it every year, you're building on something. There's already an awareness about the importance for them of why we're even discussing this in the first place. And I think, well, my sort of immediate reaction is indeed the earlier the better, because the adolescent brain, as you say, is in that mushy, you know, gray fuzzy zone anyway. Plus also they tend to be more reactive. You know, it's the you know, who am I? And so I need to break what other people have said or done in order to become me. So maybe it's not the time when they're the most open to things like empathy and compassion. You know, it's all about me, who am I and what is best for me. But this really would make a huge world of difference. And I understand you also take individual clients then, as in you coach young adults in various topics to do, you know, with whatever's bothering them at that point.
Absolutely. I have 2 teenagers of my own. I have two older children who have 5 grandchildren for me between them. And so, I have got a little bit of personal experience. But one of the difficulties, of course, is trying to coach your own children.
That's what I was thinking when you were asking the question.
That is not easy.
To those business people, I do believe, my answer would certainly have been, to involve all of them. Okay, maybe not the businesses if they find it's too early, but at the same time, why not? They do go into schools and universities, prospecting. So why not say what they're looking for and what are the skills that they're looking for in their, the jobs that they will be offering. But it's that whole idea of, indeed, often, especially for teenagers, you're not the right person. I remember battling with one of, I think, my middle child with maths, which is not my forte anyway. But after, the third session of us both practically in tears and not speaking to each other the rest of the day, I thought, this is not my role. I should be there for the rest. I should be there for the building the self-esteem, for the yes, you can, for the yes, you fell down, let me give you a kiss, you can get up. Now you've learned something, move on. But not so much for some parts. We do need to leave up to others. And also, well, my experience my kids went through the IB curriculum, which is going there a bit more maybe than others, on that developing life skills, etc. I did see it happen there, and very much around the idea of each child being unique and learning in a different way. They always tried to have various ways of learning going on in the classroom, whereas I was brought up in the French curriculum, which is very far removed from that. You do what you're told, and your own opinion doesn't matter. You learn what what the others have done, and nobody cares less what you actually think about it. Whereas in the IB system, you could stand up and say, I do not believe in what Einstein or whoever said in the school. Will say, sure, tell us, what are your arguments? So, but all of that to say that indeed it is a joint venture. But the idea of having coaching in that, you've got me actually all exciting thinking about, my target is fabulous after 50, but isn't this the time when you actually do start building the next generation, like we were talking before, the wise elder in the village, whether the adolescents would be happy to come to, or whether they'd be happy to open, to get that rapport and to feel understood, what they often don't get from their well, maybe more from their teachers than from their parents. There's often that sort of difficult period for teenagers and parents as they make their own way. And I find this extremely reassuring and extremely necessary. So how are you going about this then? Are you creating a curriculum within, let's say, the UK, which could be rolled out to schools around the world? I'm already thinking big picture here, since I've been brought up in many cultures. Yeah,
that's exactly what we do. It's not a case of what we are going to do. That's what we are trying to do. We're currently running an adolescent foundation course, which is while it's designed towards teachers, it's for anybody who works with children. But the other subject, it can be used in a class, it can be used in a small group, in a large group, it can be used one-to-one by coaches, by counselors, by therapists. And while I say it's age appropriate, just because the age of of perhaps exam busters is identified in a year, you could use that in any year. You just modify the language to fit.
Exactly, and any little test is scary, right? Because it's a test. Yeah. So whether you're 5 and being tested on I don't know what, how well you read or something, or whether you are doing your O-levels, A-levels, whatever it is, exam is stress because you're going to be evaluated, and already just the word usually we freeze and half our brain cells seem to go somewhere else, so it is learning about coping with that. And is this something that you then also teach coaches? We're talking about this audience is predominantly coaches, right? Because we're IPC&M. Is this also something that you teach? Are you a train the trainer sort of thing on these 7 modules?
Indeed, that's basically what we do. We train people, train teachers, we train parents. Invariably, they'll come back and say that they have learnt so much about themselves.
Yes.
And use the products, even the activities for the primary schools. We have parents and teachers saying, forget the children. I'm learning from this as we go, which is great.
And it's also explaining maybe lots of things to us as well about how we react and the patterns that we've developed based on how, how little life skills we had at that time. But also, as you're saying, it's appropriate for everyone, because it's appropriate for educationalists and people, teachers and all of that. It's appropriate for us as coaches. It's appropriate for us as parents, as grandparents, as uncles, aunts, cousins, whatever it is. I mean, there are children everywhere, and it is an extremely gratifying group to work with. I've just coached a young girl through her IB French. Actually, it started as French as a lesson because she was struggling with French, but it rapidly became more coaching even than French, developing her self-esteem, her belief that she could, her understanding of why would it be, why is it important to learn French? The opening of the doors, the being at ease in the world, and that sort of thing. And it worked miracles, and it gave me a huge amount of self-satisfaction knowing that the tools that she'd acquired, she could then use those in very many other settings. So this is really something that I'm personally going to look into. Now we have Fiona here. I don't know if Fiona is actually listening live or she has it on in the background. Fiona, is there anything particular that you would like to ask? And if yes, feel free to either put it in the chat or turn your video and audio on. And for the rest of you listening Facebook Live and they're listening to it after on the recording section of our website. I mean, make sure that you look up Ian's details in the show notes so that you know how to get hold of him. I mean, Ian, which is the best way to get hold of you to find out more, whether it's to have a child coached, whether it's to be coached ourselves in your modules?
The best way of getting hold of me is Ian at youngmindscoaching.org. That's the easiest one. I also
Young
have
Minds
a noble
Coaching.
Young Minds Coaching, all one word. .org. .org.
And how wonderful to hear that we have these groups, that we as well as responsible coaches and as life changers, let's say, if we want to call it that way, facilitators of change or whatever we want to call it, that we can be promoting that. And the next generation is the future. It needs to be built, and whatever seeds we're planting, let's make sure we plant the right ones, right? The ones that will help them in every day and who will look after the planet and who will ensure that there are future generations. And also, let's say that people are happy, because that mental health issue that you talked about, I mean, is, as you say, it's very much an international, a global one. Holland has huge issues with mental health in young children. And actually yesterday on the news, I heard that they had dropped from position 4. It's like happiness levels regarding mental health in, I don't know if it was young children and teenagers, they've dropped from 4 till 20. Because there's not enough budget anymore to look after, the people. And Corona has done an awful lot more mental damage than we have thought. And I see that as well. I have 3 children they've passed the teenagers, but I see it very much in their way of interacting, in their feeling that, everybody else has friends and they missed out, as if the rest of them didn't go through a 2-year Corona pandemic. So, Ian, thank you. Thank you that there is something to build on here. And these sound like very wise and holistic. It really is the big picture. It's not targeting just one aspect, because these are fragile young people as well, who maybe don't always know how to word where they're, hurting or where they're confused or worried. And in this way, you make sure that everybody can have their own little, yes, that's me. I had that and I never dared talk about it.
Indeed. I'd just like to pick up on something that Fiona's written in the chat, actually. And that is that the children are not so looking so much as school being educational, more as sort of social venue, which I can fully understand, which is, in a way, it's great. But is it the full answer? And this is the difficulty, I think, that the teachers and school staff are having. Now, it's interesting that she brings out they're looking to one another for emotional support, so as role models. And indeed, some schools are bringing in a peer mentor system, whereby the senior classes help the junior classes, and particularly in some schools, the sixth form. There's the 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds are being used, well, are being used, that's an incorrect term, but are volunteering to help support the younger age groups, which I think is a tremendous way of going, because they will open up much more to their peers than they will to the adults, and that any adult interaction in this sort of sense has a stigma. Now, we like to think that coaching is non-stigmatic, but invariably, if it's anything outside of academe, it almost carries a stigma. It means I've got a problem and I need support, and they don't want to go there. Now,
yeah, and any adult
is
associated with the "you don't understand anything about us" sort of thing, you know, a bit like a child.
Absolutely. There's that, and that's really where coaching actually breaks down those barriers, because it's not about you don't understand us. I'm asking you to understand you. I'm trying to help you understand you. It doesn't necessarily mean that I need to understand you, but you need to understand you. And my job is to listen carefully, ask questions, perhaps give a couple of ideas, but so that you learn to understand you and how to cope with you, which I think is important.
Yeah. Very good point, and very good point, Fiona, because that is very true. I mean, already in adolescence, you know, the teenagers always did tend to turn to, but of course they have the same lack of resources and core skills as most of them, but there is that support because you feel that the other understands better what you're going through. I mean, of course, the coach, let's say, does have the added advantage, let's say, compared to a parent or maybe a teacher, that we do know the skills to get that rapport, to get the young adolescent to, first of all, trust us, to feel that we understand what they're saying. As you say, we meet them in their world, whereas a parent would probably try to drag the child into their own world, thinking like an adult, etc. But so that would be interesting as well, the idea of you also within that curriculum having train the older teenager or the older school goer in order for them to be the advocates of this, which I think then also, yeah, and also helps that 17, 16, 18 or so year old also grow their own self-esteem, their own self-worth. So it's a double win.
Absolutely. Well, it's a win on so many fronts.
Yeah,
and I think that's the important thing. You know, what is utopia to me? Utopia is actually I'm out of a job.
Yeah,
because children and adolescents don't need coaching.
Right, but we'll always need somebody like you.
I doubt that will ever happen.
Exactly, and everything always changes. So somebody's got to have the intelligence, maturity, and the skills to actually concoct this sort of program to be delivered. And as you say, our world is changing at such a pace. The program itself needs to be constantly revisited to make it relevant to the world of today. Ian, thank you very much. For those of you listening, I hope it's planted the seeds in your brain about the young people around you, you know, whether it's your own, whether it's those of friends, whether it's your work, and how we can, by following this sort of program and learning these modules, how we can acquire those life skills that we can then share with other people. Fiona, thank you very much for interacting and sharing this. And Ian, I wish you all the best on your mission. I will actually be sending you an email as well. And I've been brought up in various systems. So I would love to be somehow on board here and see how I could help or how I could learn myself in order to promote this further in my own environment. So thank you, everyone. Grab your CPD pads. Now is the time to write down what you've learned before it becomes another amazing, enriching session. And we just go on to the next one. So let's think, what can we use from this and how can we make it matter? So all the very best, Ian, Fiona, and the rest of you listening out there. Until our next masterclass, this is Julie Kennedy for IAPC&M. Thank you very much.